Deb here, your spiritual cheerleader and mentor. Welcome to Greatest Jesus in Me YouTube channel. And you know what to do. Subscribe now. And friends, today we have a very, very, very special guest, Jethro. Hey, Jethro, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me to your YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for being here with us. And before we get into it, I want to let everybody know that Jethro is very special to me because he is the son of my friend, sister, Deborah. We go way back to first grade. And she's been my friend for umpteen years. So this is a very special occasion for me. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me and our friends, our YouTube channel friends.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's get right into this conversation. The reason why you're here is because I found out that you are a photographer.
That is correct. I do this as a side gig, but I love photography. My name is Jethro, Israel Jethro, but I use Dael as my photography name. Just a little backstory on that. I found out from my mom that that's how they used to call my father. My father's name is also Israel. And I kind of like that nickname. So I kind of like took it on myself. And then when I began photography as a bit more of a professional path, as a professional side gig, that's when I decided to use Dael as my photography name. So that's how you'll find me on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm probably starting a YouTube channel soon, so we'll be all under Dael Gamas Photography.
That is wonderful. Now spell Dael so that people can know how to spell.
So that's Dael.
And one of the reasons to why I was excited about having you is because I love photography. I think that photography captures and memorializes special moments. Because if you don't have a photo, nothing else is left except that photo, which can take you back to the occasion and make you reminisce. So I really love photography. So let's talk about you and your photography. How did you realize, when did you realize that you wanted to do photography? At what age? Give us that background.
So my way with the photography is rather recent. It's something that I began in 2019. Just to give a little backstory, my grandmother used to be the photographer in the family. I remember when I was a kid, she would be going around with the cameras and the video cameras. Back then it was a VHS camera, so she would have it on her shoulder and we would be recording everything we did as children. In fact, there are very few pictures of her because she was the one always behind the camera. So that's you can say that's the very beginning of photography in the family. Now, I actually began with video. My first camera, I could say, was a GoPro, these small action cameras. And I did that because I like to run. So I decided, I'm going to go buy a GoPro. I'm going to try and record my point of view as I'm running. So I actually started a YouTube channel. It didn't last too long, but I began with video. Eventually, in approximately August of 2019, that's when I decided to try out photography. It started just as a whim, just let's see how it goes. No intention of anything, just bought a camera. And today I have this one is not my own, it's a neighbor's own that borrowed me the camera, but it's the exact same model of what I started out. So I bought a Canon T6. But this is what I started out, a very similar camera to this. And I remember the first pictures that I took, they were not great. To be honest, they were not great, especially when I tried using the different modes, because these cameras, they will come with the automatic modes, but ideally you want to use the manual modes because that's where you really have control over the images that you're creating. Little by little, I began looking at YouTube channels, learning online. I took a few courses especially during the pandemic, 2022. We couldn't go nowhere. But I began taking pictures of my family, of things at home. I remember during that time, the Youth Association here in Panama, the Seventh-day Adventist Youth Association, they decided to launch an online course about 4 weeks long with some challenges. And I participated in that, just, to keep on learning. Eventually, I feel I got better at it. I began buying flashes to be able to try and mix flash illumination with photography. And I eventually bought a second camera, which is this model here, which is the Canon RP. Not this lens, but I had a few other lenses. And that's when I did my first wedding photos. Well, no, before the very first wedding pictures, I did it with a T6, and that was my sister's civil wedding.
Okay.
So, well, I wasn't there when they got married, when I had to go and sign by the judge, but once they reached home, I took a few pictures of them. So those were the very first pictures I took of them.
Wow.
Eventually, my sister and her husband got married, but they had a ceremony here at home. So that day, I remember my mom and my sister, we were everything that day. My mom was master of ceremonies, she was the bridesmaids, I was DJ, I was photographer. But I remember that day I was taking a lot of pictures of the wedding. So that was the first wedding that I did, covering that session. Eventually, I began looking at photography with more of an intention of a side gig, more than just a hobby. So you could say that around May, June, that's when I began taking photography a bit more seriously. And that's when I got to meet several photographers here in Panama. I made good friends with them, and that's when I started learning. And I feel that I have progressed a lot due to knowing these photographers here in Panama. I love photography so much that I decided, you know what, this can be more than just a hobby. This can be a side business, and that's what I'm pursuing. Just to have this as a excellent side business.
Well, that is interesting because I didn't realize, number one, that it was this recent, and that it really came from the pandemic. It was born really out of the pandemic, and the pandemic brought out a lot of good things out of people, where people realized that they had certain talents, that they liked certain things, and people really became adventurous, trying different things to stay busy. So look at how this thing turned out for you.
Definitely. And I have tried out several artistic endeavors throughout growing up, but out of all of them, photography to me has been the one where I've been able to recreate what I have in mind.
Right.
A little confession here, I've had that frustration, for example, with music. I like to play the guitar, but every time I've written a song, I've never been able to really capture the full extent of what I'm imagining. However, with photography, I have been able to recreate and even go beyond what I imagine when I'm taking pictures, when I'm creating pictures, because you have two concepts in photography. You can take a picture. That's usually what you're taking in the moment. You can do that in an event. But once you create an image, when you control the light and when you control the camera parameters, that's when you create something, and that is something beautiful.
Yes.
So it's so amazing to be able to create something.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So, and I think you kind of touch a little bit on that, about the ability to create. That is what really gives you that satisfaction of seeing a creation. So is that what you get out of it? Or is there something more too that you get out of when you do your photography?
There are two things I get out of it. The first one, as I mentioned, is the capacity to create something. Especially if it's something that I planned previously. I've had some photo shoots where I've planned, I've even drawn out. I do not draw properly. I'm not good at drawing, but I do even reach to the point of drawing out how I want the image, where I want to place the lights, and all of that. So once I'm able to reproduce that in real life, I get that satisfaction. The second satisfaction is the reaction from people once they see the pictures.
Yes, that was my next question. Yes.
You see, that is something amazing to see how people are happy to see the images, even if they're not edited yet. Just by seeing it behind on the camera screen, they are amazed and they're happy and they are joyful of what they're able to participate in the creation of. Because it's not just a photographer creating, but the person who's in front of the camera who's also part of that creation process.
And not only that, that's something that is going to last forever.
Definitely.
You touch a little bit on this. How do you prepare yourself? You said that you kind of envision the images, lighting, and so forth. How do you prepare yourself for an event?
So there are two ways I prepare myself. Number one, when it's something that I'm doing out of scratch, I will literally just start drawing and start imagining, okay, I'm going to put the person here, I'm going to put the lights here. And that's how I will work on it and then start seeing what I need to be able to create that image. The second way is based on inspiration of what other people have done. It's something that we will call like a mood board. That we have an idea is not necessarily 100% original. We're not going to copy the images either. But we have an idea of what we're going to work with. And that's the most common way that I do it. I will look for images that will become like a reference, whether on Instagram or Pinterest. And that's when I'll have like an idea, okay, this is more or less what I want to get or what I want to replicate in my own style. It's important to make note of that it's not copying somebody else's work,
right?
But it's drawing inspiration from other people's work.
Right.
So once I have that mood board or that idea, then I'll speak with a person. If it's something that I'm working on, especially if it's a personal project, I will see who's the ideal model for that image. So it's a matter of knowing who to contact. If it's a client work, well, of course, you will speak with the client and say, okay, this is more or less the idea, and there's a collaboration between the client and myself as a photographer. If it's something more of a personal project, it still goes either way. Trying to organize between the model and myself, that's the idea that I'm trying to get. So once we have that clear, the mood board, that's when a person will look for the dressing. We'll sometimes review what they're going to dress and whatnot. The locations, we need to see what locations, what time we're going to work. Some locations work good when there are less people. Some locations are difficult to get to. So it's a collaboration work that has to be done before you reach to the session. There have been occasions where I have done pictures, personal project pictures, but with no idea, and then you see what you come up with. But I feel that my best images have come from that process, that previous process of seeing what we're going to do, what location, what clothing, what illumination, to then create the image on that day.
Interesting. So what kind of projects do you work on? Which ones do you prefer to work, if you have any preference?
So I would say it's a mixture of fashion and urban. I would call it like an urban fashion feel. I like to take pictures in the city. I've taken some on the streets or on the sidewalks, on parks. So that's where I will get more of my feeling. I like to work those mixtures between urban fashion and whatnot. I've worked in studio as well. It's a different feel in the studio, but I prefer to work outdoors.
Okay.
I prefer to go out in the field to draw inspiration from where we're at, from certain ideas and whatnot. But it's usually that urban fashion feel that I have.
And then what you do with those photos?
Well, mainly I will post them to my Instagram account. Also, I will share them with the model, and they will post it to the Instagram account. So that helps as promotion as well as to what I'm doing. But on 2 occasions, I have been contacted by some magazines. One was Lybell magazine, and the other one I think was Maxi magazine. And they saw my images, they liked the images, so they told me, hey, we're constantly receiving submissions from photographers. You can submit your own. and see if we will eventually publish it. Which fortunately it has been done. I've been published on these two magazines.
Yay! That is great.
That was amazing. Just to know that my images are on a magazine. And both set of images to these magazines, each one was a different feel. One was with the urban fashion style. Well, we took those literally on the street. That was a Sunday afternoon that we went to the stoplight and we took the pictures with the city as a background, the buildings in Panama as a background. And those were published in one magazine. I believe those were in Maxi magazine. The other one was another concept that we worked on while she was during the contest, during the beauty pageant. But after we took the pictures, we could not publish it because we took her with a crown. And since she was still in the pageant, I had to wait till the pageant was over to be able to publish those images. But those, like I say, those are among my favorite images. Those we took them at night, the old town here in Panama, Casco Viejo. And it was just, I call it the Red Queen series because she was in a long red dress and the crown. Beautiful. So those two sets of images have been published in the magazines.
Wow, that is awesome. And what about doing, I know you mentioned you did, you took photos at your sister's wedding, for your sister's wedding. So do you do that too? Do you do like events like weddings or milestone birthday parties, anniversaries? Do you also do that kind of work?
I have done up to now 2 weddings, including my sister's own and another friend's own. And I've done what we call quinceañeras.
Oh, yes.
I know in the States it's 16, but here in Panama we celebrate 15.
Right.
So I've done for those 15-year birthdays as well. I remember the second wedding that I did, which was a friend of mine, very close friend of mine. That was the entire afternoon, the entire ceremony, the reception. It was a bit interesting because I had to do the ceremony, and we had the group photos right after the ceremony. Everybody wanted a group photo with the bride and groom. But a little before the reception, that's when I got to do the couple pictures. So that was a kind of a switch in what I was doing because during the event I am just capturing the moments, capturing the people's faces, their expressions and whatnot. And the same in the reception, mainly capturing the speeches, how they react and whatnot. So it's a different workflow. You're not really looking for something posed, you're looking for So when I had to switch from looking for the moment to creating a moment, it's a different switch, a different set of lighting and whatnot that you use. But those images came out beautiful as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Because I know wedding photos, those are priceless.
Definitely.
That's the only thing that is left after the wedding. And normally when you're in the wedding, you're just in the moment. But then as a couple, then you want to see the pictures. That's when you really take everything in. And those are really priceless. And then the poses.
Definitely. It's not the same posing a single person for whatever image you want. When you have to make a couple pose, it's something different, but it's so beautiful once you get the perfect pose to show their emotion, their love for each other.
Yes.
Just amazing. It's just amazing.
When you capture that love.
Definitely.
Well, that's good to know. So the folks in Panama that would like to reach out to you for photography, knowing that you do different events, that's great. And also, if there's anybody here that is going to Panama and wants to take some photos, they can also reach out to you.
Definitely. I'm always welcome to work.
That is wonderful. So what are your aspirations with your photography? Where do you want to take it, or how far would you like to go with this?
There are different types of photography, definitely. I've tried out a few, but the one that I lean towards the most is is usually fashion photography or portrait photography, working with people. That's where I'm kind of like, I get into more. I have photographer friends that, for example, their specialty is precisely quinceañeras photography, 15 years. And most of the work comes from that, from working with these teenage girls with their dresses and whatnot. So that's usually how they are known, by that specific set of work they do.
Right.
So my aspiration is more towards the fashion, more I would like to work with brands and whatnot, with stores locally here in Panama. And if eventually I have the opportunity to do it internationally, well, so be it.
Hey, and you just never know. The sky's the limit.
Definitely. But I like that more of the fashion and the modeling toward, because of the creativity
right.
that I can invest into that, into planning the photo shoots, into working, for example, with makeup artists and stylists, and getting a set of images created, especially for publications, for magazines, for all these kind of things. So that's where I'm going towards. That's what I'm aspiring to.
And I heard you said portrait. Do you do also like family portraits, stuff like that?
I have worked on family portraits, not as much, but I have worked on family portraits on a few occasions. I remember one time I worked on a birthday photo shoot for a lady. Most of the pictures were for her, but at the end we did a picture with her kids. So that was the fun part, working with kids. The kids were a little bit older. I think one was about 12 and the other one was about 8. So I remember they were walking around. The small one wanted to be the assistant and reviewing the pictures and whatnot. So that was fun. And I also remember I did a family portrait for a church family.
Right. And I've seen your work, the work that you did on your mom. And it's beautiful, those pictures.
Thank you.
For her birthday.
Thank you. And that setup was very simple. That it was very simple. It was just the backdrop, a simple flash, a speed light, like how we would call it. Speed lights are usually the flashes that you will have on your camera for an event or something, and a shoot-through umbrella that we use for photography, and that was it. That was the whole entire gear that we had for that session.
Well, let me tell you, it just captured her beauty. Beautiful pictures, I'm telling you.
Thank you.
A work of art. So what advice or tips would you give any aspiring photographer?
So for an aspiring photographer, for example, someone that doesn't have a camera yet, I would advise them, you don't need the latest and the greatest technology. You can start simple, and that's where you begin growing. You can invest in a simple camera. For example, I started with a T6. This model came out, I don't know if it was in 2012 or something. So you could say it's an older model, but invest in something simple and start learning how to use it. Once you reach to a point where this no longer fits your needs, that's when you know when to invest a camera, because there's a term that photographers, we use, gear acquisition syndrome, or gas syndrome, how we will call it, because we want to have all the gear. That's normal.
The latest and the greatest.
Want the latest and the greatest. So we just want it because of wanting sake, and that has happened to me. I remember near around the time I did my sister's wedding that they bought this camera, this model camera, the Canon RP. I had bought by that time I had 2 lenses, and I got about 2 or 3 more from eBay that arrived more or less at the same time. And I eventually realized that 2 of the lenses that I had gotten for that period were very close in what they could do. So it was almost redundant to have both of those lenses.
Oh boy.
So it was, well, I spent the money, and then I realized, and that's the worst part, I realized I was not using those lenses as much. I eventually sold both of the lenses.
Wow.
Because at that time I was just into, I want the gear, but I didn't really know what I wanted it for. So my advice, if you're starting, invest in a simple camera, get the feel of it. Invest more in education, whether you do it on YouTube, invest time in YouTube, or you invest it in a platform. But invest in education more. Number two, practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice, practice.
Because it is in practice, and try all kind of things. By practicing, that's when you realize what type of photography you like and which one you don't like, or which one you would like to do more than the other.
Right.
For example, I have tried out food photography. It's not my favorite thing to do. I've only done like one or two pictures like that, and I realized it is good. I've seen some amazing food photographers, but you can't really pose the food. There is some styling that goes into the food, but you're not directing much there. And
yeah,
I like
and
that.
I like me, I'll eat it.
Well, that's the fun part of being a food photographer. You eat it after you take a picture. But I realized by doing those pictures that while it is fun, it wasn't my favorite thing to do.
Right.
Or for example, there's product photography that's usually done for catalogs and whatnot. While there's always job for product photography, is not something that I'm interested to, because once again, it's an inanimate object, and I feel I'm not doing much with it. I did a lot of product photography, but to practice. And I remember I have this little elephant that my former boss got me from Thailand. And I remember I made some pictures with this when I started out learning how to use Flash. But it wasn't my favorite thing to do. I mean, it was a tool to learn, but I just left it at, okay, I know how to do that, but I prefer to work with people. So that's why in my case, I eventually realized I like to do portraits. I like to work with families. I've done events and I enjoy doing those events. I like fashion photography, so I'm leaning towards that. So once you know what type of photography you're into, that's when you know what type of gear you need. Because there are several types of lights and several types of lenses and whatnot, or even several types of camera. But depending on the type that you're working on, that's when you realize why you need a specific lens or why you need a specific camera. There are some cameras that are better, for example, for wildlife photography.
Yes.
Bush photography. The camera, for example, this camera is not necessarily the best for that kind of for wildlife or animal. It's not necessarily the fastest one. For example, when I'm working on portraits, it's perfect.
Right.
So by practicing and by studying, you realize exactly what gear you need, and then you will be able to invest properly. So that would be my advice. Start simple, invest in education, practice, and then you'll know what to invest in.
That is excellent advice. And I will say you are a people's person too. You have to know yourself, because some people may not be good with interacting with people or a people's person. So that also will dictate what you want to specialize in.
Exactly. I've met some photographers that are into sports photography.
Oh, yes.
Because they don't like to deal with people. And it sounds counterintuitive. Well, sports photography, you're taking pictures of people, but you're taking pictures of the moment of what they're doing in their sport. But you're not posting it, you're just capturing that moment. And that person, I think, is a girl, that's what she likes to do. She likes to do sports photography. But she says she gets anxious when she has to deal with a couple or something like that. In my case, I would much rather deal with a couple or deal with a person or whatnot than to be trying to do sports photography.
Yes.
So it's that. You have to analyze yourself, see what kind of you are, see what works out for you.
Yes.
I remember a YouTube video I watched on a photographer that I like. He was explaining our street photography. And he said he went out on 2 occasions with some friends, and something was happening. I think one was after a game and another one was some protest. And they went into the crowd and started taking pictures of what was happening. And he stayed just on the sidelines because he could not deal with being inside the crowd. However, if you look at his street photography, it's amazing, but he usually goes without interacting with a person, with taking a specific moment and looking for patterns of light. So that's how each one put. In photography, you put your personality into your image.
Yes, that's important. That's an important part of it.
So once you know what you like, what you don't like, you can focus on what you like, and you can make your best out of it. So that will be my advice. Try and that's how you even get your style, your signature, because that's something that we tend to look for in photography. Everybody wants to have a specific style and whatnot. Don't try and copy somebody else's style because you're gonna get frustrated. Just be patient with yourself, work on what you like, and that style will eventually come to you because
be yourself.
Be yourself, exactly. Be yourself, and your personality will shine through your pictures.
Exactly. Beautifully said. That was beautifully said. But those are really two great advice for any aspiring photographer and really too for anybody getting into any profession. Start simple and then you start figuring out what you really like or don't like and moving forward with that.
Exactly.
Well, Jethro, thank you so much again for being my special guest on Greater is Jesus in Me YouTube channel.
Thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure being here.
This has been a wonderful conversation for people, especially those folks that love taking pictures and photos and stuff. This is a great conversation. So friends, remember to go to Greater is Jesus in Me YouTube channel, and you know what to do. Subscribe now. Be blessed, and until next time.